This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning is Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass, who's here somewhere. He got lost in the caverns here at AM 560. There he is.
Yeah, I'm not the one who showed up late.
I didn't show up late. I'm here. The bell just rung. We're on the air. You're wandering around.
As I told you.
Can I get you a cup of coffee, Mr.
As I told
Cass?
you when you made your Debbie Reynolds dramatic entrance.
You
pull that when we're going fishing. I'm leaving you at the motel.
All right. That's fair enough.
All right.
Hopefully
we're shave. I expect fishermen.
To fish?
Yes, I do.
Do I have to wear like a suit? Like my
No.
Connie Mack?
No, just a tie.
Okay.
Probably a woolen tie, I would say.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, hopefully wherever we go fishing, there won't be lane closures on the Kennedy in between me and the watering hole. All right, a funny thing happened the other day, earlier this week, on Wednesday, that did not get much press. And to my knowledge, did not result in any protests, violence, unrest.
Is this my fault?
No.
What?
Rayshard Brooks, the Atlanta police officer charged with murder in the shooting death of Rayshard Brooks, remember at the fast food place in Atlanta, was reinstated but will remain on administrative leave. He's reinstated his position with charges pending. The Atlanta Civil Service Board saying in a 5-page decision, the city failed to comply with several provisions of the city code and the information received during witnesses' testimony when it fired Garrett Rolfe, that's the officer. The board concluded the appellant, that would be the officer, was not afforded his right to due process. Therefore, the board grants the appeal of Garrett Rolfe and revokes his dismissal as an employee of the Atlanta Police Department. Huh.
So he's going to sit on a desk for the next 20 years?
Yeah, that's assuming that he's not convicted of the crimes for which he's charged. But here's the thing. Due process.
Yeah.
Due process.
What's that?
I thought that had gone out of fashion. And also, even something where you have Black Lives Matter just looking for a reason, and Antifa and those that are even more violence-oriented, looking for a reason, this doesn't receive any attention, and it doesn't result in any protests on the street. Isn't that odd to you? And it runs then right after this announcement on Wednesday, the announcement yesterday that Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, a vice presidential shortlister, not so long ago, has announced she will not seek re-election. Democrats in Atlanta openly blaming her for the city's crime wave.
The real story.
Wait a second. I'm not used to this. Wait. The residents of Atlanta, including those that are the same party, are blaming the mayor for the spike in violence. I'm not familiar with that being a Chicago resident.
Because they don't in Chicago. As a wise man said this week, she walks loudly but carries no stick.
Oh, I read John Cass's column.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
She's the anti-TR, is what you're saying. The anti-Teddy Roosevelt.
She's the anti-Niccolo Machiavelli. She's not loved nor feared.
Well, so what about that? And to take your impressions on this. The city of Atlanta, I believe it's majority black population, but it's certainly a black population as significant as Chicago's.
Mm-hmm.
And Miss Keisha Lance Bottoms is being shown the door, much like Jenny Durkin got shown the door in Seattle. You know, they announced they're not running for re-election. It's not to spend more time with their family. It's because there's no path, the same way that Tiny Dancer announced he couldn't seek re-election because there was no path to victory.
Two things going on.
So here,
Two things.
Here, 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, 64636DA, turnkey.pro text line. Why not here, John Cass?
Two things happening nationally. One is that what really happened in the summer with all the violence and the riots and the mostly peaceful protests and the anguish of the media. You know, can we call them riots or do we say peaceful? All that was about hard left activists devouring liberal Democratic mayors. Okay? They were pressing against the order supposedly to be imposed by liberal Democratic mayors, many of them black. So that's one thing.
Well, so on that one thing, they were telling them who's actually in charge.
Yeah,
and you better fold in. That's the same thing the Chicago Teachers Union does here.
Nothing like crazy white leftists telling black mayors how to run their cities.
Right.
And then the other thing is people in the neighborhoods, they're not protesters. They want order. They don't want to get shot. They don't want their kids shot off the porch. Funny thing. They want order and they want police. I've been doing this for 6,000 years. No poor neighborhood wants to lose their police.
Right.
Right?
But it seems that there was a political price to pay in Seattle and Atlanta. What about Chicago?
You got to beat a horse. You got to have a horse.
Well, but I mean, will there be a political price to be paid? I mean,
who's going to bring it? Tony Preckwinkle or Kim Fox or Tim Evans? They're responsible for it.
Well, that's the question.
Funded by Soros and all that.
Are they the only people in Chicago in positions that could deliver reckoning, and positions that could offer another horse, as you say?
With Pritzker as the chairman of the Democratic Party de facto.
Yeah. Why not Pritzker? Why wouldn't Pritzker want to introduce a new horse? If Lori Lightfoot was suffering in the polls the way that Keisha Lance Bottoms apparently is, the way that Jenny Durkin was,
we took polls.
But they know internally.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
She's in trouble.
Lori Lightfoot's in trouble, you think? So then why would they not shoot her? The proverbial horse thing. Metaphorically, I'm talking about.
Right, I'm not even going to go metaphorically.
Politically, you know what I'm saying.
Right,
you started the horse thing.
They're going to take me out behind the barn someday.
Why not send her to the glue factory? How's that? Is that better?
There's no. I don't see anybody like in New York. The guy in New York running, African American, running on. Let's have police. Let's have police in the neighborhoods. I don't, on the left freaking out and wringing their hands. I don't see that here yet. So is she going to survive? I don't know.
Greg and LaGrange, you're on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Hi. Hey, John.
Hey.
You don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to pick and choose the most glorified race to the bottom Western civilization events that occur in Chicago for the last 2 years and get away with it, because the destruction of our children and the crime in the city has been something that has been going on for decades, and it's only accelerated prior to the whole BLM movement in Chicago. And we know our kids have been destroyed intellectually and being held captive by the situation that we see unfolding before us now.
Brutalized.
The only problem I have is I would think that there is some outcry from the people of the West Side and the people of the South Side that I hear on weekend shows about the crime that goes on in their neighborhood, and they're tired of it too, and they want reform with police, but they want police, but they want reform. They want policies to evolve, and they want it done in a reasonable fashion because everybody values security. There is no business, there is no life, there is no safety without security. Here's one of the things I believe. It may be the opposite of what many believe, maybe even on this show with Dan, but how does the Hispanic contingent in this city, just a tremendous ethnic group in this city, not mount a challenge to Mayor Lightfoot? I don't see how that's not possible.
You see it happening
Thanks
now.
for the call, Greg.
Louis Gutierrez, the one-eyed jack of Chicago politics, put down his marker as a progressive, even though the heroic taxpayer to me is just nothing. And how about Ray Lopez?
Yeah.
But I don't see a strong. See, and that's the sadness, because Latinos, particularly Mexicans, are strong family, Catholic, conservative people.
You can say that about almost every demographic in Chicago, and what they all have in common is they lack anyone with political courage and independent thinking to represent them. That's sort of the fundamental cultural problem that transcends race.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning is John K., as in Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass. John, Liz Cheney is apparently on the cusp of being ousted from House Republican leadership, and of course the D.C. press corps is...
Yeah, they're all for the Cheneys now.
Yeah, except very pro-Cheney. They've always been pro-Cheney.
You know, not only has Jake Tapper always been pro-Cheney, but during the push for the Iraq War, where was he then? Did he ever criticize Cheney? Did he ever criticize Bush? I mean, the Cheneys are part of the establishment that pushed us into wars that we didn't have to fight. And that all those kids died and got blown up in.
Although it would be, I don't know if Dick Cheney would take the same approach that Liz Cheney has taken with President Trump, not just during the end of his administration, and particularly the vote for impeachment, of course, impeachment 2.0, but the rhetoric since, which has been pretty strident and continues to be. Washington Post editorial this week: Trump is seeking to unravel critical elements of our constitutional structure that make democracy work, confidence in the results of our elections, and the rule of law. No other American president has ever done this. The Republican Party is at a turning point, and Republicans must decide whether we are going to choose truth and fidelity to the Constitution.
So they want Trump to be the nominee, right? Because that's what they have. They have nothing else.
Who's the they?
The establishment, the Washington Post, and all these people. I guess they want it because he sells papers for them. They're liars. I mean, the same newspaper you just quoted wrote a story, a couple days ago, about how great Al Sharpton is. What a great man.
Yeah.
Without mentioning Tawana Brawley or anything else. Crown Heights riots, anything.
How about his unpaid tax bills?
Tax bills?
So the NBC News saying, pending this removal of Cheney from House leadership, that the House Republican caucus has surrendered to Trump. The Republican Party has surrendered to Trump is what they're saying. Well, Kevin McCarthy, who is, essentially let the caucus do the talking when it's come to Liz Cheney to this point, was caught on a hot mic this week during before or during Fox and Friends interview. He had this to say about where he's at right now with Liz Cheney.
I think she's got real problems. I've had it with it's I've lost confidence. Well, someone just has to bring the motion, but I assume that will probably take place.
He's had it with her. He's at his wit's end with Liz Cheney. Is that the real choice, do you think? It's either go with Liz Cheney and those who voted to impeach President Trump, Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, that ilk, or you go with Trump and you're surrendering to one side or the other. Maybe there's just disagreement about the path forward, and Trump is representative of a certain attitude, but he's not the only person who's representative of that attitude, who's in a position of authority, elected official, and prospective presidential candidates for 2024. 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, 64636DA, turnkey.pro text line. And there's something else, too. This is happening against the backdrop of that audit going on in Maricopa County, the election audit. And Liz Cheney, this paragraph that I selected from her op-ed in the Amazon Post, Trump is disqualified. He was worthy of impeachment because, he started an insurrection. But what Liz Cheney is really saying, and what the D.C. press corps is echoing, because they've been saying this since November 6th, is that you're not allowed to question the results of November 6th. To do so is to unravel critical elements of our constitutional structure that make democracy work, according to her. She said, confidence in the results of our elections and the rule of law.
That's fine, but excuse me, in 2016, how many times did I hear CNN, Washington Post, all these actors, Hillary Clinton screaming, John Lewis screaming, illegitimate election, Russian collusion? How many times did I have to hear that? It never stopped for 4 years. So what are you asking me? Mm-hmm. What is being asked here of the people?
With respect to the elections, it's very interesting what may come out of Maricopa County. I was talking to somebody sort of in the know on that yesterday. And one of the things that he told me is that, and he talks to election officials there and in other states, is that just in Maricopa County, there were 214,000 ballots that were adjudicated. Remember, we talked about this during the election challenge saga, the adjudication of ballots when there was an incomplete mark for one candidate or the other. And he said that there was, because there was the speed, I mean, remember Arizona's relative tardiness in reporting the results. Mm-hmm. So in order to move through the ballots that needed to be adjudicated faster, one of the things the Dominion voting system provided was to do batch adjudication. Rather than doing them individually, you could do them as groups. So you could just mass adjudicate. And if you mass adjudicated, there was essentially a default setting to a particular ballot position. And so the argument is that there were many votes in the thousands projected. We don't know yet. But the argument is that this could be coming. There were thousands of votes that were batch adjudicated on behalf of Biden, not because they were saying Biden versus Trump, let's go adjudicate on behalf, but because of the way the system was set up for batch adjudication and how it deferred to a particular ballot position, you know, first versus second, and it happened to be Biden first on the ballot in Arizona. I think that's right. And so you could have, upon individual ballot inspection and re-adjudication, a flip in the thousands, tens of thousands of votes on re-examination. And so, and this is not even a criticism of Dominion. And one of the things they don't know, as I understand it, is there was the option to batch adjudicate and use the default provision, and some election judges, precincts used it, and some didn't. There's not, at this point, my understanding, a handle on how large it was, but there's some sort of back-of-the-envelope hypothesizing about it. And so here again, I understand that the 2-month saga from November to January, in terms of the quality of the election challenges that were offered by the Trump legal team, it was a fiasco. And so it makes it that much more difficult for people to take seriously that there are legitimate questions about how these elections were run in particular states, that there's no reason not to have this audit in Maricopa County, and it is going forward despite the saber-rattling by the Department of Justice. And there may be real underlying issues that should be cured, not to remove Biden and reinstall Trump, some goofy conspiracy theory. That's not going to happen. Prospectively, for the midterm elections and the elections beyond them, which is exactly the conversation going on in places like Georgia that passed an election law, like Florida that passed an election reform law, and others.
You're making a big mistake.
Why is that?
Your mistake is that you're trying to apply analysis to an emotional issue.
Yeah.
Where people who are tribal will say, Liz Cheney's telling the truth. You're supporting Trump. And I'm not. I'm not supporting Trump. That's not the issue. But it can't be reduced to the babbling of the mob.
That's right.
This is something that requires adults in the room to sit down and think about long term.
Here's I go say this routinely now because of the dynamic at play exactly as you described. I don't know. I'm just suggesting that that's a legitimate question if what I understand to be true from somebody really in the know, is something that are exploring. And I don't know what the outcome is going to be. But why don't we find out? What is the problem with asking questions and finding out answers? You don't like the question because you're happy with the outcome? That's fine. That's your position. You can say that. But then we know what you're really interested in. You're not interested in certainty or as close to certainty as we can get on particular issues. You're just interested in flag waving your position, celebrating an outcome that you liked or decrying an outcome you didn't.
But those aren't serious people.
Well, I know they're not, but we are, and so we're going to do it anyway. And by the way, it's interesting, too. On the Georgia law, Josh Croshair over at Hotline published a polling recently, Atlanta Journal-Constitution polling. I saw some from him, but it was AJC that did it. 46% of Georgians approve of the new election law, 44% disapprove. That's remarkable after all of the excoriating of the Georgia law, everybody who's important, celebrities and CEOs saying, if you support the law, you're racist, you're suppressing those. So 46%.
Baseball, don't forget baseball.
Oh, yeah, Rob Manfred, 46%. I mean, this is the follow-up question that should be asked. So 46% of Georgians are racist and they're trying to suppress the vote of black people? Is that right? By the way, where have, Kyle Smith had a great piece in National Review on this too. Has anybody heard from Ed Bastian at Delta recently? Well, why so quiet all of a sudden?
Maybe he's going to have a op-ed that can be, op-ed in USA Today that he can go back and change if he doesn't like the results.
Even Coca-Cola CEO James Quincy, based in Atlanta, right? Coke.
Right.
Where's he gone? You know why? The boycott flopped.
Yes.
The boycott of Georgia, I'm talking about.
Yes.
It flopped. Now they shut up, but they're so concerned about voter suppression and enfranchisement and anything that prevents blah, 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 blah. They couldn't persuade a majority of Georgians with their racial demagoguery, so they shut up, the CEOs. There's a lesson for you, too. A lot of lessons to be had here. Maricopa County, we'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just reporting something that is, being talked about in fairly closed circles because I think it's interesting. And that may not be the last word on how the elections were administered in some of the other states. My understanding is there's going to be more coming out in other states in terms of the analysis that takes time because it takes so much data collection and you have to endure resistance from certain local election authorities and so on and so forth. But ultimately, the evidence should tell the story. And those who are uninterested in people asking questions and trying to cull together evidence to answer questions are just that. It's just exactly what you said. They're not serious people. They're just ideological or partisan hacks.
The problem is that Trump's legal team poisoned the waters.
I know.
Trump himself poisoned the waters, screaming about how it was stolen. It was stolen without evidence. The issue wasn't that it was stolen. I don't believe the election was stolen. Do I believe, after covering politics most of my life, that it was rigged, that mail-in voting and the pandemic and the fear porn and all that were, it was at a point where Democrats could take advantage of it? Yes.
Maybe. Maybe that was it, and maybe it's just issues that are, frankly, fairly innocent. They're really technical issues or process issues, not partisan issues like I'm describing with this batch adjudication procedure in Maricopa County, if what I'm reporting is accurate, but I believe it to be. But I'm not so certain about how ballots were counted in central processing sites, which is in a way that hasn't been done before, and the ability to introduce completed ballots that are dumped in Zucker boxes or processed, because ballots don't have names on it. And so the question becomes, do you go back and do you find that there were more ballots processed than those who have now been recorded as having voted in the election? I think that's an interesting question, and I think that question is being explored, which is why I said I don't think this is over quite yet. Tom in Deer Park.
You started talking about Cheney, which is why I called. Now you're going into the Maricopa ballots, which is where the Q people are looking for bamboo fibers.
There we go.
Okay.
I don't care about the
Q
people.
There it is.
I'm not talking about the Q people.
Tom, be serious, okay?
Yeah.
I'll forward you the piece. They're looking for bamboo fibers in the ballots.
We're not talking about the Q people. We're talking about substantive issues.
I don't even know what Q is.
I want to talk about Cheney.
Well, Cheney is related to this story because she's the one saying the big lie, big lie, big lie.
I'll talk about Cheney, and after I'll hang up, and then I will forward you the piece about.
Who cares?
The
I don't care. I don't care about what Q says, Tom. You do. See it, Tom. You're not going to talk about Cheney because you can't get over your desire to fold everybody who voted for Trump into QAnon or Q or whatever the hell they're called. Right. And we're talking about what's happening with the audit by the election professionals there and those that they've hired. And a substantive issue. And you want to talk about some QAnon conspiracy theory. We don't. So who's conspiracy theory obsessed? You.
Listen, Dan, people
so annoying.
I want to give Tom a break here because I think people on all sides of politics just the default position is accuse the other guy of some kind of crazy conspiracy, right?
Totally.
And guess what? That does not, and when the media plays that game and marginalizes millions and millions of people, that's not good for the republic. That's what I care about.
You want to know you're dealing with a simpleton? You want to know how you're dealing with a simpleton of 2021 America? The person's entire definition of you is whether or not you voted for Trump. In either direction. John at Bridgeport.
Real quick, guys. Everything you guys just described regarding what's going on in Arizona, we wanted Pence to do this back on the certification date.
Not Pence's job. Not Pence's job. Done with that. Blaming Pence, that is ridiculous. Pence said that is not his job. He doesn't have the authority to do that. That's what election challenges are for. That's what having a legal presence the night of in counting centers in big swing states with a history of dubious administration of elections. That's why you have ballot security programs. That's why you have lawyers at the ready. That's why you coordinate your arguments in courts of law and to gather evidence to support the claims you're making in courts of law. This scapegoating of Mike Pence, I've been trying to be polite about it. I'm losing my ability to be polite about it. It's ridiculous. And it's not because I'm supporting him for running in 2024 or anything else. He didn't have the authority to do anything other than he did. It wasn't his responsibility. Stop imposing upon him authority he didn't have and thus responsibility you think he should have exercised. Honestly, Mike in Plano.
Mike Pence did have the authority to send the results back to state legislatures, and that's the argument being made.
That's a bull jive argument. Bull jive. Bye, Mike.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning is Chicago Tribune columnist extraordinaire, John Cass. And, John...
yes, I am.
Yes, you are what?
Extraordinary.
You are.
I can't help it.
No. And why deny it?
Right.
We don't need false modesty here. Tucker Carlson did this riff on his program on Wednesday night, about a 15-minute riff, actually, on vaccines. And... post some questions, and I saw it. I'm like, okay, well, this is all
the guy's opinion.
And it's all fair game. He's raising some questions that we've raised on this show that we've asked, infectious disease experts and medical doctors about as we're trying to learn more each day about vaccines as well as so many other aspects of COVID, even to this day, despite the fact that everyone on the left just about has taken a position and they're sticking to that position regardless of any
They're still wearing
evidence.
masks outside, man. They're vaccinated, and they still want their kids to wear masks outside.
As I mentioned yesterday, when the Atlantic goes south on the left, with respect to the draconian positions they have on lockdowns.
They characterized it as neuroses.
But Tucker Carlson's segment on vaccines, of course, because his audience is so large, has received a firestorm of response. Dr. Sanjay Gupta over at CNN calling it reckless and irresponsible, and all the usual suspect D.C. press corps outlets weighing in. And so I just thought, for those who hadn't heard it, and particularly leading into our conversation at the bottom of the hour with Dr. Martin Calder from Harvard Medical School, I thought we'd go over it a little bit because I think he raises some questions. And there's one aspect of his piece that I think he could have done better, which I'll get to. But I mean, this is where he really draws the ire of the left, that is, cheerleading, demanding almost, some supporting mandates, so supporting the demand to get vaccinated. And they don't want to hear any questions because that could turn into cognitive dissonance, and that could dissuade some people from getting the vaccine. And Tucker Carlson, I think, makes a salient point that by not allowing people to ask questions, that's what's really dissuading people from having confidence in the vaccine. But nonetheless, he goes to this VAERS system that we've talked about before on this show. There's been reporting on, too, at the local level, the network affiliate level, and we've covered it, where and interviews by local reporters. We'll pull it up. There was one out west where there was a handful of women. This is before the Johnson & Johnson vaccine issue and its temporary halt in terms of usage, where there were adverse outcomes. And the VAERS system is a CDC system for public reporting of adverse outcomes from all vaccines. And it's a self-reporting system, so it's the responsibility of the patient and or that patient's physician. And the criticism is that the VAERS system maybe captures 1% of the adverse outcomes because of the failure to abide the self-reporting guideline, and that's what it is, a guideline. There's no repercussions for not reporting professionally or legally. So it probably underrepresents, if anything, since it represents a small fraction, according to of the outcomes reported, according to those who have an understanding of VAERS more so than I, probably underreports adverse outcomes. But if you look at the VAERS system on the COVID vaccine so far, you find that more than 3,000 people have died after getting the virus. Note what I said. After getting the virus, I'm not making a determination on cause of death because of the virus. I'm not saying that the vaccine was the proximate cause of death. I'm saying they died per their self-reporting or their physician's reporting after taking the vaccine.
In just the first 4 months of this year, the U.S. government has recorded more deaths after COVID vaccinations than from all other vaccines administered in the United States between mid-1997 and the end of 2013. That is a period of 15 and a half years. Again, more people, according to VAERS, have died after getting the shot in 4 months during a single vaccination campaign than from all other vaccines combined over more than a decade and a half.
That is an interesting data point, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm saying that prompts like legitimate questions. Now let's talk about those deaths, those people who died after getting the vaccine, and whether our understanding is that there's just a correlation, or in some cases at least is there causation.
The point of journalism, I'm not calling Tucker a journalist. He's an opinion maker and maybe possibly running for president someday.
Well, I don't know about that.
And he's positioning himself. But the fact is, you have to be able to ask questions. And even the asking of a question is seen as some sort of dangerous thing. And I'm just stunned.
Well, and you have to ask questions because people who are the experts are saying things that we know are untrue.
Or they're all over the map.
Let me give you an example. Tucker Carlson points to one that we pointed to on this show many times.
Health authorities are pretending that everyone's health and risk potential is exactly the same as everyone else's. And that's why Joe Biden has demanded that 70% of all American adults, regardless of age, regardless of health condition, regardless, critically, of pre-existing antibodies from previous infections, get the COVID shot by the 4th of July 2 months from now, or else.
This is a key point, it seems to me. Treating everybody as everybody is in the same risk pool. Everyone has the same risk profile. And we know that's not true based on age, based on pre-existing conditions, comorbidities, based on including obesity. We know that's not true, generally speaking. And yet, that's exactly how that's being communicated, is whether you've been infected or not. That contributes to your risk profile, too. I'm infected and I'm recovered, but I'm just as at risk as somebody in my age cohort with my same medical history who hasn't been infected. That's not true.
Yeah, it undermines confidence in the people to get. I want people to get vaccinated. I got vaccinated. I think it helps. I'm not telling people to get vaccinated. You must. And maybe I had it because on the second shot, maybe I'd already had it because on the second shot, I almost thought I was going to die. You know,
is it fair?
If it wasn't for Kristen McQuarrie guiding me through the column, I don't think I would have been able to write it.
Well, is it fair to say this? I want people to get vaccinated for whom the risk of COVID is greater than the risk associated with the vaccine. And I don't want people to get vaccinated, or I wouldn't get vaccinated if I were such a person, where the risk of an adverse outcome from the vaccine is greater than the risk of COVID infection. What's wrong with doing it based on doing a risk-based analysis on it?
Nothing, and everybody has the right to do what they want to do on this thing.
Yeah.
You know?
So, I mean, where's your mask? Well, why are you worried about my mask? Have you been vaccinated? Yeah, I've been vaccinated. Well, then why are you worried about it? Because I'm one of the minders. I'm one of the COVID Stasi.
That's what's happening. As the left-wing Atlantic pointed out, all this, the fact that the left is clinging to the masks and all that, this stuff around the masks, outdoors, suggests neuroses, a political neuroses.
And when we talk about risk, as with COVID, we're not just talking about death or hospitalization. We're talking about other side effects, as Tucker got into a bit.
In all, the vaccine, according to the government reporting system, appears to have contributed to at least 8,000 hospitalizations. Some of the side effects defy easy explanation. Researcher Alex Berenson has noted that coronavirus vaccines now account for almost one-third of all tinnitus reports in the VAERS database. Tinnitus, the ringing in your ears. The American Tinnitus Association says it has received many questions on that link. It's still not known if there is a link, but there's concern about it. Meanwhile, researchers at Oxford and UCLA have begun tracking coronavirus vaccine side effects across 8 separate countries. What have they found? Among other things, quote, women aged 18 to 34 years old had a higher rate of deep vein thrombosis than men of the same age. They also found that heart attacks were, quote, common in people 85 years and older who'd taken the vaccine. They found some serious potential side effects in some children. Quote, anaphylaxis and appendicitis were more common in young people.
Mm-hmm. And and by the way, on tinnitus, remember the founder of the Texas Roadhouse restaurants killed himself. And the reported animating event that led to his suicide was this terrible case of tinnitus he had after having COVID. So again, I'm not saying that his tinnitus wasn't from COVID versus the vaccine. We're not saying that the vaccine causes tinnitus. We're saying there's some there are potentially some side effects that are being investigated that may be linked to the vaccines, and those should be further explored so you have a true understanding. Knowledge is always going to be imperfect, but you have more perfect knowledge of what the risks are associated with taking the vaccine. Why is that position such a problem? It's interesting because it wasn't a problem for those same people saying Tucker Carlson's questions are a problem or Joe Rogan's questions are a problem. It wasn't a problem for them to question whether or not we should continue administering the J&J vaccine after those blood clot cases in women. They stopped administering the vaccine. Now, I don't think that made sense based on what we knew about the risk at the time. And a lot of other medical professionals did too. But they did it anyway. So why is it okay for them to ask questions, go so far as to stop the implementation of a vaccine, but for Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan or anybody else to ask questions along the lines that Tucker did in his piece? That is out of bounds. That's reckless.
You know what? Years and years ago, when the Bush-Cheney, anybody who still wants to think about Cheney, when the Bush-Cheney people were telling us we had to go to war in Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction, there was a stampede in the media, a stampede to go to war. And people were stampeded into it, me too. And after, and I've apologized many times, I realized, and I told myself, I will never, ever be stampeded again. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing with all this stuff is basic, the whining. You've got like some people who can't even think 2 sentences in a row, and they're whining and virtue signaling, in media. And others are playing the conspiracy game. I'm not going to get stampeded. Let people, take a step off my corner and let me think about it.
Well, listen to sort of what Tucker Carlson is talking about. Listen to the chief medical officer for CVS Health. There's a guy named Dr. Sri. And this is on a page that CVS Caremark Health put up with sort of, FAQs and medical professionals addressing some of what's being bandied about out in the public. But on the issue of vaccines causing serious illness or death, where one side is asking some questions and pointing to VAERS reporting and some of the research that Tucker Carlson said, that reference that's ongoing. The other side is, again, speaking with absolute certitude about what the vaccine does and doesn't do.
Will the vaccine cause serious illness or even death? No, actually quite the opposite. The point of a vaccine is to train your immune system to fight against COVID-19. And what we do know is that COVID-19 in and of itself causes serious illness and even death, as we have seen over the past year. The vaccine itself, as we have discussed earlier, has in rare events some side effects that are very similar to flu vaccines, with site injection pain, mild fevers, tenderness, joint pains, chills, and those usually last for a day or so. There have been no patients in the trials that have died from receiving the vaccines. And over time, we are tracking the safety of these vaccines to determine long-term side effects. They appear to be very safe, and therefore it is important to recognize the vaccines are doing quite the opposite, protecting you against serious illness or death, and they will not cause serious illness or death.
I agree with that statement, generally speaking, based on the data we have now, but it's interesting. We're tracking the long-term effects to see, right? So that's open-ended. He also said no one has died from receiving the vaccine in the trials. Because with respect to those that have been reported at the VAERS system, the answer is that we don't know. We don't know if they died, from some other condition they had. Obviously, how many people have gotten the vaccine? Then people are going to die from other unrelated issues. Of course, that's true. But are there any cases where the proximate cause has been the vaccine? I go back to this report by the Utah CBS affiliate. Heidi Hatch is the reporter on vaccine side effects. This is back, and we covered this. This was back in March. So this is 2 months ago now. And listen to one woman's testimony. This is a real human being.
Probably 3 hours later that I was having breathing problems.
Carrie was rushed to the hospital, treated for an allergic reaction, and sent home. The next morning, her battle to breathe began again.
Very, very scary. I immediately went to the COVID ICU, and they did the swab right away and determined that it wasn't COVID, but that it was a reaction to the shot.
Once stabilized, Carrie was moved to another floor.
I got up there and coded again, and they brought me back down. Well, all the breathing and wheezing and everything had ruptured my vocal cord.
While Carrie's allergic reaction is rare, Dr. Tamara Sheffield, medical director of Intermountain Community Health and Prevention, says there are more allergic reactions to the COVID vaccines than first expected.
Anaphylaxis is moderately higher,
with twice as many documented allergic reactions from the Pfizer vaccine compared to Moderna.
I mean, so So based on just that report alone, you can't ask questions about this? You can't make sure that we're tracking this and say, what is the risk profile of the vaccines changing for certain people? What do we understand to be true?
Right, but at the same time, you want to be reasonable. You don't want to with all vaccines, with all drugs, there are reactions.
I know, but
I can't wait we could talk to Dr.
Well, I know,
but I just don't want to drive people away from getting the vaccine.
Neither do I. I'm not driving people in any direction. I'm asking questions, and that's what Tucker Carlson was doing. Now he should have been more explicit. The one criticism I have been saying, this is potentially correlation. We don't know causation. We don't know, but that's why we're asking. That's why we're asking, and that's why we're saying, let's stay on top of this. What's wrong with that? And by the way, for those people, how dare you confuse correlation with causation? Number one, we're not. Number two, this is coming largely from people who said, if you died with COVID, you died of COVID. If it looks like COVID death, it was a COVID death. These are the same people who were not interested in determining proximate cause of death when it comes to COVID, and now they're not interested.
I died of a heart attack or cancer, but COVID was in my system, so therefore it's a COVID death.
I died in a motorcycle accident, but I had COVID, so therefore it's a COVID death.
Right.
I mean, seriously. So, I mean, the hypocrisy on this, and that, of course, also undermines confidence in these pronouncements. Jim in South Elgin. Hey, Jim, you're on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I don't think I saw the segment on Tucker. I don't think he mentioned, but the CDC hired Harvard to do the study on their VAERS system, and it was Harvard that came up with the 1% figure, and they, paid them some seven-figure, consulting fee, and Harvard came up with a solution for this to correct this VAERS system, and in the Harvard report, they mentioned that the CDC cut off all communications with them.
Interesting.
And I just wanted to add that.
Interesting.
It's detailed pretty well at Del Bigtree's, the Highwire site, and including the Harvard report.
All right.
That's all I wanted to add.
Thanks for the call, Jim. Pete in Montgomery.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, John.
Hey.
So everything that you're saying is true on both sides of the story. The vaccine, all of the side effects of the vaccine are known and expected because the vaccine base, the material that's giving you the protection against, or that's bringing the protection to you against COVID into you, has been used in other vaccines across a wide spectrum of diseases. So these side effects are expected. Illnesses, deaths, reactions, they're going to happen, and they know it is. The only difference between this vaccine and others is the unbelievable scale of the people that are getting vaccinated as adults and young adults and elderly. Flu vaccines a year ago or 2 years ago were a lot, maybe a million to 2 million.
Yeah, but thanks for the call, Pete. We're up against the clock, but I mean, Tucker actually compares it to swine flu in the 70s, where it was 150 million people that were vaccinated, and the numbers are very different here. Again, that's not dispositive of anything, but it does demand more inquiry. That's all, and that is the stuff of a hysteric, a crackpot, according to the D.C. press corps. Who are the real crackpots?
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for John and for Amy this morning is John Cash, Chicago Tribune columnist, as you know.
I don't know. I might, just do this radio thing full time.
Oh, really?
I kind of like it. It's
You also have the Chicago Way podcast. We should hasten to add.
Yeah,
Chicago Way podcast. So you're sort of doing it now.
One of the best podcasts I've ever heard in my life.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Unsolicited testimonial by John Cass for John Cass' podcast.
It's the only place where I can tell you how I'm working the column out, and hope you can go to it. Just find it. I don't know how. I got to teach people how to get to podcasts. Some people don't know.
Yeah.
As you know, Dan.
It's an evolving audience. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday we had a new pronouncement from Dr. Tony Fauci. And I thought people...
Which one?
Thought people should hear this because you want to keep abreast of the latest developments and diktats, don't you?
I'd say even if you live alone, I would wear a mask in the house, especially in the shower, because frankly, droplets can make the way through the drain and come up through somebody else's toilet, infecting them with COVID through the anus. Ballpark, in 2 to 5 to 20 years, we can start thinking about considering the idea of pondering the thought of conceptualizing the possibility of maybe, perhaps, reopening, but probably not. I would avoid having any fun whatsoever in the near to far future.
Those are the comedic stylings of one Tyler Fisher, not actually Tony Fauci, but pretty good.
That was very good, and it's nice to know that there's comedy still exists in this woke world.
Yes, very good impersonation, both in terms of the actual dialect as well as the substance.
And the meat, the rhythm, and
Yeah.
the use of the word anus, I thought was...
that was very good. Yeah, that really turned it for me. 2 to 5 to 20 years, that's probably going to be next. But the most important thing is that Tony Fauci is rightly being treated as an object of ridicule. And whether...
Saint Fauci.
Yeah, whether you want that to be the case or not, I mean, when you promulgate the sort of guidelines the CDC promulgated about summer camps that we've talked about earlier this week, you deserve to be ridiculed. For more on all things COVID and vaccine related, pleased to be joined by Professor Martin Kulldorff again, professor at Harvard University's Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital. Professor Kulldorff, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
Thank you have a Tony Fauci impersonation you'd like to offer? Have you developed
I'm sorry.
one?
I could never do that.
You
I don't have those skills. I apologize.
All right, well, just see what you just stick to infectious diseases then. That's fine. Way to stay in your lane. That's always helpful. Now, you recently felt the sting of the Twitter minders. Harvard Medical School professor Martin Kulldorff was chastised about his medical knowledge from some 25-year-old Sarah Lawrence grad who monitors Twitter content. When you said that the thinking that everyone must be vaccinated is as scientifically flawed as thinking that nobody should. That was deemed misleading by the Twitter overlords, but explain yourself.
Well, that was a surprise. When it comes to vaccinations, if you've had COVID-19, you have immunity, you have good immunity. We have more evidence concerning the benefit of immunity after having had COVID-19 than after having the vaccine. So we should use the vaccines for those who are not immune. And it's very important for older people to get the vaccine if they haven't had COVID-19. But people who have had it don't need the vaccine. And it's also children do not need to be vaccinated. For them, COVID-19 is a very mild disease. Less risky than the annual influenza, which is already have low mortality for children. So it's the older people that really needs the vaccine. And I actually got in trouble with CDC for saying that because they did a pause on the J&J vaccine a couple of weeks ago. And when I voiced my view that we should not pause the vaccine for people over 50 because there was no evidence of any risk among them, and they really need it because we need those vaccines to save life. I was removed from a CDC committee on COVID-19 vaccine safety. Mm-hmm. So I've been getting in trouble both for saying that we should vaccinate more, as well as for saying that there are some people who don't need vaccines.
Yeah, you're just the bad boy of infectious diseases these days, apparently. You're just supposed to wait for what the CDC says and then just repeat it, apparently, these days.
Yeah, and I have worked with vaccines for almost 2 decades, so I was thinking that my views might be quite interesting for some people to hear.
Doctor, what do you...
That's where you're wrong. Yeah,
Doctor,
right.
What do you make of the hysteria, public hysteria, and politics around this business of vaccines and infection. And I just wonder, as a scientist, you must be constantly amazed at the jabberings of people on all sides of this issue who don't know what they're talking about, yet try to lead public health debates.
It's stunning and it's disheartening. And as with my colleagues who do vaccine research, I mean, we're worked several decades of trying to build confidence in vaccines, because the measles vaccines is important, the polio vaccine is important, and in this case, COVID-19 vaccine is very, very important for older Americans and also older people around the world. So it's very strange, because we've had these a very small group for a long time, a very small group of so-called anti-vaxxers who don't want any vaccines, and they're rather loud, but they haven't really been able to put a dent into the vaccine confidence of the general population. But we now have this other group who are fanatically trying to pursue vaccine passports or vaccine mandates, which are very bad for public health, because those coercive strategies reduces confidence and trust in vaccines, and not only COVID-19 vaccines, but also other very important vaccines. So while they pretend to be in favor of vaccinations, they're actually doing harm to the confidence in vaccines in this country. And that's very bad. And I wish they would just stop, with trying to coerce vaccination on people, because it has the opposite effect.
Yeah, I remember a time when big media was skeptical of Big Pharma and not their comm shop. But that's not the case. And so today, not the case today. And so today, Pfizer is seeking authorization, FDA authorization for its vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds. And then they're going to seek authorization for the vaccine for children ages 2 to 11 in September, it's been reported. So for those age 2 to 15, I mean, what your message to parents is don't get the vaccine, or you don't need to get the vaccine? What is it explicitly?
Well, children are at extremely low risk from COVID-19, and they also don't transmit it very, very much. So my message is that children do not need to wear masks, and they don't need the vaccines. We should not be afraid of children. When the pandemic started a little over a year ago, I was afraid for about 10 minutes, because as soon as it reached Italy and Iran, I knew this was going to be a worldwide pandemic that would reach everybody in the world, and that a lot of people were going to die. But as a parent, the thing I'm most concerned about is my children. And I have 3 ages, 18, 5, and 5. But as soon as I looked at the numbers from Wuhan, it was clear to me that while we didn't know exactly how dangerous it was, we knew that there was an enormous age gradient, so that the virus was very dangerous for older people, but not for younger people. So then I sort of relaxed and said, okay, whatever happens, we don't quite know, but I knew that my children are going to be fine and that we're going to survive this pandemic. So we should not scare people. We shouldn't scare our children for something that they should not be scared of.
When it comes to the VAERS system, we're revisiting that because of some of the heat that Tucker Carlson is getting for his riff on vaccines the other night. And I believe you were on his program earlier in the week. But the VAERS system, help people we've attempted to explain it, but you're a professional. Help people understand this reporting of adverse outcomes after taking the vaccine, the COVID vaccine in this case, but it's for all vaccines, and whether or not there are legitimate questions raised by Tucker Carlson and us on this show and other people about assessing the risk of taking the vaccine, particularly as you go down the age demographics where the risk of a bad impact of a COVID infection is de minimis.
Well, the most important thing to realize is that the VAERS system is not a good system. It's actually quite a bad system. It can be a very misleading system that CDC has. It's useful for certain things, like if you have vaccine reactions very soon, within an hour or so after vaccination, then it can be useful. But the problem is that anybody can report a suspected adverse reactions. But those numbers are just reported by CDC as counts. But you also have to have in science a denominator, like how many would you expect by chance?
Right.
So if you have millions of people taking a vaccine, obviously some of them are just by chance going to die within the next few days or weeks, and some of them are going to have a heart attack, some are going to have a stroke, and so on. So those numbers that CDC is reporting in the VAERS system are misleading, because they are just counts and are not related to what you would expect by chance. So I wish that CDC would sort of de-emphasize that system and instead emphasize two other systems that are much better, much higher quality, scientific quality. One is the Vaccine Safety Data Link that CDC has, and the other one is the FDA BEST system, which uses data from electronic health records and health insurance claims data, where you actually know exactly who had the vaccine, how many of those had the particular outcome that you're looking at, and how many would you have expected by chance.
Well, so what do those systems tell us then about adverse outcomes from the vaccine?
You have to ask CDC and FDA that question.
Oh, this is not publicly available.
I think some is, but not in totality, no.
And it's just, I mean, I hear what you're saying about VAERS, and you know, and particularly to exercise caution to not confuse correlation with causation when it comes to an illness or a death, just because you also took the vaccine. But it is interesting to note that confusing correlation with causation was not something that was of particular concern to people when it came to classifying COVID deaths.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other story with COVID death, because we all know that some people died with COVID rather than from COVID. And the one stunning thing is that there has been very few studies who actually look at what that percentage is. There was one small study out of Sweden who did it, but there's been very few others. And if CDC did this job, I think, then they would, or the Department of Health and Human Services, any agency within the government, need to do those studies so we find that out. And it's somewhat resource extensive, because you have to go and look at the medical charts for a large number of people. But you can do it from a sample of people. You can take a sample of 1,000 or 2,000 and see. So that should be done, but that's one of the many things about COVID research that's not being done for some reason that is very puzzling to me.
Dr. Kulldorff, you mentioned earlier in our discussion that you're a father and you have 3 children, 18, 5, and 5.
Yes.
So twins. And
yes.
I wonder, like, with so many parents being inundated with conflicting reports and hysteria and neurosis about children wearing masks outside, as a expert in the field, do you have your 5-year-olds wear masks as they're playing soccer in the backyard?
No.
Why is that? Don't you care about your children?
Practicing what he preaches, I guess. Yes, right.
So one thing I'm more concerned about is for my 18-year-old son. I have been for the last year pushing him to go out and play basketball with his friends and do other things to have all those social interactions, because I'm not worried about him and COVID. I'm worried about his mental health and his social well-being. So I've encouraged him to socialize as much as possible with his friends, and I'm not at all worried about him getting COVID. So.
He is Martin Kulldorff, professor at Harvard University Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital. Professor Kulldorff, thanks as always for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J is the equally lovely and leggy John Cass, Chicago Tribune columnist.
Whenever I look at that chunk of hair on my back, I think of myself as a leggy columnist.
That is really tantalizing visual.
I can't help it. That's how. You know what, Dan? It's who I am. It's how I was born.
Hey,
I'm proud of being me. I should be at the CIA right now, explaining how proud I am of me.
You live your truth, sister. Absolutely.
You go, girl.
So Sunday is Birthing People's Day, as I understand it. And Cori Bush, who's this newly minted congresswoman out of the St. Louis area, won in a primary over a long-time Democrat incumbent. And she, I wouldn't say this is an audition to join the Socialist Spice Girls, because she's really been a member of the band from the beginning. She testified before the House Oversight Committee. Now,
she's like in the Birthing People's Auxiliary.
Well, in part, it was poignant testimony because it was about the touch and go nature of her two children's births, because they were both born premature. And you would think, oh, well, this is going to be interesting because there's going to be gratitude about the medical professionals that rally to save her premature her children when they were born premature. They're both healthy. They're grown up and they're healthy today, and that's great. But of course, no. Even something like that, when you're talking about a Socialist Spice Girl, turns into this Orwellian political diatribe, and that's what happened.
The doctor who delivered my son apologized. She said, "You were right, and I didn't listen to you. Give me another chance." 2 months later, I was pregnant again, so I went back to her. At 16 weeks, I went for an ultrasound at the clinic and saw a different doctor who was working that day. I found out again I was in preterm labor. The doctor told me that the baby was going to abort. I said, "No, you have to do something." But he was adamant, and he said, "Just go home. Let it abort. You can get pregnant again because that's what you people do." My sister Kelly was with me. We didn't know what to do after the doctor left. So we saw a chair sitting in the hallway. My sister picked up the chair and she threw it down the hallway. Nurses came running from everywhere to see what was wrong. A nurse called my doctor and she put me on a stretcher. The next morning, my doctor came in and placed a cerclage on my uterus, and I was able to carry my baby, my daughter, my angel, who is now 20 years old, my son, who was saved, is now 21 years old. This is what desperation looks like, that chair flying down a hallway. This is what being your own advocate looks like. Every day, black women are subjected to harsh and racist treatment during pregnancy and childbirth. Every day, black women die because the system denies our humanity. It denies us patient care. I sit before you today as a single mom, as a nurse, as an activist, and as a congresswoman, and I am committed to doing the absolute most to protect black mothers, to protect black babies, to protect black birthing people, and to save lives. Thank you, and I yield back.
No, thank you. To protect black birthing people, because, John, you could get pregnant today.
Not bloody likely, but you know what? The people that come up with phrases like birthing people for women are bleeping sick, okay, in the head. And another thing, just want to mention it, people are ripping, I hear her ripping on her doctor. I want to thank Dr. Ron Lorenzini, who had hands as big as Johnny Bench, or maybe Johnny Bench's catcher's mitts, and terrified my wife. And he saved the boys, he saved her, and I have a family now. So, on Birthing People's Day, maybe you want to thank the doctor who also helped.
Well, that is it's such an amazing twist in her testimony, isn't it? To not only go after her, the doctor, with respect to her son, who, when she said, "I'm not feeling well," he said, "Just go home and it'll be all right," and it wasn't all right. Not only to sort of blame him, despite the fact that those same people came and were able to, again, rescue her her son who was born prematurely, but also just to castigate, I guess, the profession of OBGYNs across the West.
She's a Democrat?
As not recognizing black women's humanities.
She's a Democrat?
Did you say she a Democrat?
She's a Democrat? Yeah. Let me ask you this. Did she vote? So she supports abortion, right?
Well, I know. That's the other irony.
Let's speak about black babies' humanity, which is denied routinely by by people who, I don't want to get emotional before Birthing People's Day, but their humanity is denied, making it easier for them to be killed.
Well, assuming that what she said is a true account of her exchanges with her doctors, it was interesting that she took the pro-life position when it came to her child.
Yes, of course.
For more on this and other matters, we're pleased to be joined again by David Harsanyi, senior writer for National Review, author of First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today. David, it's not just AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and Elena Presley anymore. Now we have Cori Bush, too.
Right. Birthing people sounds to me like, or black birthing people sounds to me like something a white identitarian racist would say about black people, not something a black person should be saying about black mothers, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, right. That's talking about stripping some people of their humanity, and also, I mean, this too, just against the backdrop of the CDC announcement this week that the U.S. birth rate saw its largest drop in 50 years. So, I mean, I guess this paradoxical world in which Cori Bush and others live, I guess it's working out for them on both sides. I mean, these are the ZPGers. This helps to make the case for open borders, and while also substantiating, I guess, their position of being pro-abortion.
Yeah, I thought her testimony was actually quite powerfully pro-life. Right?
Yes.
She's saying that a doctor told her, "Don't worry, the baby will be aborted. You know, we can't save this baby," and she fought to save those babies. But yet, she'll vote to get rid of the Hyde Amendment to directly fund late-term abortions, viable babies, and those I think she said 23 weeks was her son, so that's a viable baby, and it's getting earlier and earlier in the pregnancy, and I don't even understand why they don't see this discrepancy in their position. They think one life is important to save and the other isn't. In New York, some years you have more aborted black babies and birthed black babies. That's another thing white identitarian racists are good with, and so is, Planned Parenthood and NARO.
That is the point, isn't it? You make it in National Review today. White identitarian racists is what they should be called from now on. And this I just wonder, how long will black people take it? Ruled by some kid, 25 years old, screaming his head off at a rally. How long will they take it?
I don't know. I think that many black Americans actually aren't as woke or socialist as maybe some of these politicians are, but I don't know that they hear enough about what's being said. I mean, I think anybody with, a brain would laugh at the idea that men can get pregnant or whatever complicated formula they've come up with to say things like that, but who knows?
Well, and this is the larger conversation about the reshaping of the American family by this administration. Dan Henninger over at the Wall Street Journal had a good piece on this week, Democrats killing the American dream, and he talks about the American Families Act from the Biden administration, and writes, this isn't about culture wars or standard Keynesian stimulus spending. The Biden plan is about public policies that will redesign American society, and it really calls the question, are most Americans ready to accept middle-class entitlements as a substitute for centuries of individual striving? Is everybody willing to essentially volunteer to go on the dole, to trade their freedom and their upward mobility for that funny money security?
We know where this goes because you can look to Europe. The family's collapsing in Europe. You have welfare state after welfare state begging people to have children, now trying to come up with policies to incentivize people to have children. Well, people don't have children because you give them money or you don't give them money. And, I'm going to sound somewhat, this is going to sound like hyperbole, but Marx and the left are against the family unit. They want to destroy the family unit. They wanted to rely on the state. And I don't know if some of these people have read Marx or not, probably not, but they're headed in the same ideological direction. And I think it's incredibly dangerous in the long term.
Well, here's the thing about Marx. I mean, trying to simplify this so as it doesn't become, sort of like the dense discussion of philosophical Marxism. But, I mean, the goal here is their stated goal, so just take people at who they say they are, egalitarian society, right? That's equity, equal outcomes. That's what equity is. And so that's what it means. And so the only way to get to equity, since everybody is born to different parents, different birthing people, and some parents are great parents, and that gives those kids an advantage, and some parents are less than great parents, so that gives some kids a disadvantage. So that you eliminate parents and you make government the parent, and then you can achieve equity because everybody will be in the same place and everybody will be regulated to the same destination.
Well, they want the government to run preschools in most places, and they want the government to run higher education, basically. I mean, the left runs those things anyway, but they want to expand it, and they want to, not take your kid, but they want you to send your kid now. And that's their whole entire childhood. I mean, listen, I think people need to make their own choices in how they do that, but the state keeps funding and incentivizing people to hand over their children. I think that's a problem. And then they don't want to they don't want to allow you to choose the school you send your kid to. They don't want to allow you to homeschool. And they control the schools. So, I sometimes I hear myself, I think I sound like a crazy person, but I mean, this is what's happening, right? And we have to fight back because it's getting worse and worse.
Well,
cradle to grave.
I mean, I don't know, John, about you. You're obviously married. I'm single, and
I'm obviously married.
Well,
yes, I am married.
Yeah, I know. Well, because you just talked about your family.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. I talked about Betty and the kids.
Yeah, so that was the leading indicator.
Yes,
you disclosed it. But I mean, David, my position is, look, if Bill and Melinda Gates can't make it, what chance do I have, really? So I'm walking away. I mean, what chance do I have with Melinda Gates? I'm not interested in that.
She's got a lot of money.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But I'm not interested in their particular cause celebs.
People have sold their souls for less, Dan.
It seems to me, I mean, now we're getting into this is like The View or something, but it seems to me the fundamental problem with the marriage, from what I've been able to glean from some of the reporting and some of the previous statements and books and whatnot, seems to me the problem is Bill Gates thinks he's God and Melinda Gates thinks she's Bill Gates. Is that a fair read?
I haven't paid any
I
attention
think so.
to it.
Yeah. All right. I'm just checking. David Harsanyi, senior writer for National Review, author of First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun, From the Revolution to Today. David, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning, Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass. Yes,
Good
the
morning,
John Cass.
everyone.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, John, a lot of people, I think for a lot of people, public disfavor, like being ridiculed in public, this is why people have such a fear of public speaking. That is a fate worse than death, right? We know surveys that find that people would rather be physically injured than publicly ridiculed.
Which is why it's a weapon of the left and successful one.
But maybe not so. Maybe public disfavor is not a fate worse than death. Maybe you don't have to go out like Socrates, imbibing the hemlock because you questioned the orthodoxy of your betters. Maybe there is something to be had in exile, even if you are victimized by the Jacobins. I'm thinking philosophically because of this piece by Kaylin Ford that we discussed earlier in the week, which if you haven't read, you should read. You should also share. There's a piece at AmericanMind.org. They can't cancel your soul. And we're pleased to have Kaylin Ford join us now. She is a documentary filmmaker in Canada. Kaylin, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So before we wax philosophical further, tell us what happened to you. We recounted it a couple of days ago as per your piece, but the first-person account, I think, would be helpful.
Sure. So I was, in 2018-2019, I was running to be a member of the provincial legislature in Alberta, Canada. So this, for Americans, we don't have a bicameral system at the provincial level. So this would be the equivalent of a seat in the state House and or Senate. And I was quite a prominent candidate. I was sort of considered the face of my party, and was representative of a new generation of conservative leadership, and was very heavily, prominently profiled in the national and local media. And then a month before the election, a website that was sort of affiliated with my political opponents published an unbylined article citing an anonymous accuser, saying that in a private conversation years before, I had echoed white nationalist rhetoric, was their accusation. Now, in truth, I hadn't. I was actually discussing ways to reduce the risk of sort of far-right radicalization. But in my accuser's telling, I was expressing sympathy for white supremacist terrorists. And this was 3 days after the Christchurch Mosque massacre, when 50 innocent people were killed at prayer.
In New Zealand. Right?
Yes, that's right. And before I could even respond to this, my political opponents put a press release demanding I be removed from the ballot, implying that I was morally unfit to stand for office. And a media storm and a social media storm immediately ensued, without any attempt to actually understand what had actually occurred and what the context was. And within 4 hours, my candidacy was terminated.
Wait a second. No, I thought so. So this attack comes, and then wouldn't it be then your political allies? You said run it face of the Conservative Party there locally. Your conservative allies, people that you knew from the academy, people that you know as a filmmaker, they all rally to your defense then, right?
Well, no. This is sort of one of the important things to understand about what's termed cancel culture is that it's not just a matter of being sort of mobbed online or shamed and accused in the press. The actual cancellation, so to speak, can only be effected through an act of institutional capitulation, right? It's when your institution, when your allies decide that it's too much of a risk to try to defend you. And no institution is more reactive or more anxious than a political party on the eve of an election. And so I was just put in a position where I had to resign and step down. The challenge for me was that I did not have records of the conversations that they were quoting. And so I couldn't actually present to the public what had actually been said and what the real context was. I couldn't show how they had edited my comments deceptively. So I had no real defense. And an election cycle is...
Well, you couldn't show... I mean, I would think the press would be wanting to hear from you so they could pillory you some more. And so couldn't you get up in front of the press corps and say, this is... I know the conversation that you're referring to, and this is the context of it. This is my actual view. This is what I actually said at the time, which was my view then and is my view now.
So I eventually did. I went on a local radio show and presented my side of the story and sort of disclosed what the full background was. And my political opponents coordinated a petition drive to drive that radio host off the air for having the temerity to interview me and allow me to defend myself.
The reign of terror.
Sorry, what was that?
The reign of terror. We're seeing it again.
That's right. Yeah. So when you're falsely accused in this context, I mean, there's nothing resembling due process, right? There's no rules of evidence. There's no presumption of innocence, and there's not even really a right to a defense. You are accused, and so you are guilty. And that was what happened. So after that, a lot of journalists and editors in Canada said, look, we know that this narrative about you is false, but frankly, I don't want to be exposed to the same thing this radio host was exposed to. She faced enormous pressure. She almost lost her job. And people just didn't want to put up with that.
So you're just eliminated then. You're just vaporized in terms of any sort of public footprint.
That's what it felt like, right? And one of the really quite frustrating things about these processes, and I've heard this from so many other people who've been through analogous experiences, is that privately, people will say the nicest things in the world about you. They'll say that they know that this is an injustice.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right.
And
nothing like private courage. Yes.
That's right. And that is really one of the very frustrating things, is that the more social capital people have, the more afraid they are to lose it. And so particularly people in positions of influence become very afraid of saying what they believe to be true if they fear that it is unpopular. So there's a huge amount of preference falsification that sustains these phenomena.
Those of us who've gone through some of what you have gone through and survived it, like I have, will never forget. I mean, Dan, for one, Professor Charles Lipson, for another. You'd never forget Tom Bevan from Real Clear Politics. You never forget the people that stood up for you when your head is being demanded. And I thought your piece, They Can't Cancel Your Soul, I make it required reading for everybody who can hear my voice. And may I just ask you about one part of it?
Yes, of course.
I'm just quoting here, and forgive me, but I do have the voice of a nightingale. I know it. As a public person, Kaylin Ford writes, I felt I had been vaporized and condemned to live as a kind of ghost, conscious, seeing everything, yet no longer part of the world. Lurking beneath Hugo's motto is Ovid's description of exile as a living death, and I can do no better. So, my friend Ghost, are you still a ghost up in Canada?
It very much feels like that. But this, I write in the piece, is, in a sense, I think that's what affords a person a measure of lucidity and at least an opportunity at moral clarity. Because ultimately, the things that were taken from me, my name and career and reputation and position, and sort of, being able to feel that I enjoy the esteem of my peers or whatever else, all of these things ultimately are transient and they exist outside of ourselves, and so can be given and taken from us by forces outside of ourselves. And this is something that is true of all of us at all times, only it's easily forgotten. We start to think that these things are stable and permanent, and we're aggrieved when we lose them suddenly. But we all ultimately lose all of these things when we die and we depart this world, right? And so that in that sense, I think there is a sort of gift in being made to lose them somewhat more prematurely and still having time left to us in this life to focus on the permanent things, the things that can't be given or taken away.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned in your piece that you're a mom of two, and I wonder how much of what you're enduring and the way that you've chose to tackle it is because of the example that you want to provide your children.
Well, they're my kids are both very young. So my daughter, my younger one is only 2 years old, and my older is 5. And but the courage of my older daughter through this was an example to me. Yeah, certainly, and I think that it's important when you go through significant experiences of loss or suffering, as we all do at some point in our lives. It's important to find a way to redeem that. And it seems to me that the only available course of redeeming suffering available to me is to try, though I often fail, but at least to try to bear it with nobly and to find some good in it. I think that's,
your 5-year-old daughter, she had an appreciation for what was happening to you?
A little bit. She understood because I was campaigning for a year, and this was our routine for 9 months, ever since basically after I was cleared to walk after my second daughter was born. I was on the campaign trail, and so virtually every night I would go out campaigning, and that was a huge sacrifice for our family, and something that my daughter learned to bear very stoically. And after I had to resign, she'd tell me that I need to go campaigning again, and that this time she would help me. She was very courageous in the face of that, and something I appreciated a great deal.
With a little removal from this, and particularly maybe in wake of this piece that is getting noticed, has there been any boomerang effect to your benefit? People now saying, if you've got a documentary film idea, I'm interested in helping to underwrite it or raise money for it. I'm interested in helping you get your career back. I'm interested in helping you in some material way because what happened to you was wrong. Are people perhaps shamed enough for what they didn't do in the moment that they're doing something or trying to do something for you now?
I think it's a little bit early to say, but I was very fortunate in that among other things, I've previously made documentary films, particularly about human rights abuses in China, and I was very fortunate that some of the people the contacts that I made in that context were willing to, still believed in me and were willing to support me in making another documentary film. And so I'm currently working on a documentary that is sort of about this thing we call cancel culture. And interesting, you talked about Plato at the very outset. I often say that Socrates, it's actually a sort of, well, it's Plato's Socrates that you're referring to.
That's true. That's true. Yes, yes, that's true. I should have known better than to try to trade wits with you, but per this piece where everyone from Seneca to Dante to Victor Hugo is mentioned. But
everybody
anyway.
has to read this.
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kaylin.
But I say that the documentary is actually it's a revalidation of the arguments made in Plato's Gorgias dialogue, and the Gorgias basically ends. Socrates is trying to convince his interlocutor that we should not be afraid of death, that there's really nothing dishonorable in being falsely accused and wrongly put to death or sent into exile or tortured or deprived of your civil liberties. That's not what's dishonorable. What's dishonorable is doing wrong to others. And Socrates says at the very end of that dialogue, he says, we have to take greater care to avoid doing wrong than we do to avoid suffering wrong. And above all else, we must concentrate not on making people believe that we're good, but on being good in our private lives as well as in public. And if someone does prove to be bad, however, punishment is essential. And the next best thing to actually being a moral person is becoming one. That is learning restraint by paying the penalty for one's wrongdoing. And so I think if you internalize and believe what Socrates is saying there's really nothing to be afraid of from the vantage point of the soul in our current political climate, as long as you try your best to cleave to virtue and to doing what is good and to saying what is true, then you have nothing really to fear.
She is Kaylin Ford. She's a documentary filmmaker up in Canada, as we were discussing. I tweeted out her piece again. I'll do it as many times as I need to. They Can't Cancel Your Soul at AmericanMind.org. Kaylin, a beautifully written piece and wonderfully grounded perspective. Appreciate your time. Stay in touch, and good luck to you with your forthcoming documentary and your pursuits more generally.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on this morning.
And she joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning, Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass, and April jobs numbers are in, and lo and behold, people respond to incentives, both economic and political. What a revelation. This story in the Wall Street Journal before the jobs number was announced. Federal Reserve report in April described shortages across numerous occupations, including drivers and housekeepers. An April survey by job search site ZipRecruiter found that fewer job seekers felt financial pressure to take the first job offer they received, 35%, compared with 51% when the same question was asked in 2018. More than half the people surveyed said they preferred a job where they can work from home, and 45% said they would want that option after the pandemic abates. ZipRecruiter economists saying the pandemic has changed people's motivations. Employers may need to be patient as vaccines are still being rolled out and may have to become more flexible in order to find workers. And They're also
more flexible. They had to bribe them.
They got to pay more, and that's what's also happening. And then the political incentives. This story out of Maine. Employees at a Dollar General store in Maine quit this week in order to publicly protest capitalism. They put a sign on the door after they walked out, closed indefinitely because Dollar General doesn't pay a living wage or treat their employees with respect. Google General strike and learn how we can take our power back, another sign said. Yeah. Capitalism will destroy this country. If you don't pay people enough to live their lives, why should they slave away for you? Read another sign. Good times in the labor market.
If you pay people to sit home and watch Netflix, that's what they're going to do.
And when you expect, and that's what they're going to do. And so when you expect 978,000 jobs to be created in April and you get 266,000 and the unemployment rate actually goes up, there's your explanation. For more...
It's probably Trump's fault.
More depth on this, we're pleased to be joined again by our guy, Scott the Cow Guy Shalady, Fox Business contributor. Scott, 978 projected, 266 recorded. But America's building back better, I understand.
Well, I think they renamed Dollar General to Ruble General, so that's been taken care of. Boy, this is a mess. I mean, all of the talking heads are trying to find an excuse, and it just might be the fact that we're paying people to stay home, and the government's the biggest competition for our workers right now. And that could slow things down. I think there's still some big unanswered questions like, hey, Biden wants to spend all this money trying to get people back to work because he thinks the economy is suffering. Arguably, there's parts of the economy that are on fire, and they should be because we're just opening back up. But at the same time, you want to try to restart your economy. You want to tax it to death. I mean, there's so many hypocritical things, both with the pandemic and with government policy right now, that I think people's heads are spinning, and this is a perfect example of it when we get numbers like these, because, most of the people you'll speak to would say that, things are on fire. And I get a little frustrated about that because, nobody on this earth has ever seen a $28 trillion economy be shut down to zero, and nobody then has seen one get started back up. So if we don't have numbers that are on fire, I would be worried, right? So it's like they're trying to associate all this great news with a new technology or we've invented something bigger and better, but all we're doing is reopening. I mean, I can't get that excited about it. We're reopening something that should have never been shut. And yes, maybe there are some pandemic winners and losers, and maybe we did move around and change people's behaviors a little bit. But you know what? Stop celebrating reopening. I don't understand. This economy, when I hate it, when this economy is on fire, well, hello, it should be. We just turned the gym lights back on.
You know what this calls for, I think? Another $2 trillion in stimulus.
Well, I mean, it'll be 10
Make it
at
4.
least. It'll be 10 at least, but when it's over. And I'm not a big fan of the Fed. I usually will fade the Fed. I don't agree with a lot of what they do, but this time I think they might actually be right because, by going softly and kind of waiting, this is now going to back up everybody's expectations about when the Fed might move or maybe even start to even think about tightening rates. So you're going to see the markets kind of digest that today and think, oh, wait, this is going to mean the Fed's going to need more input. So it might take longer for them to maybe even hike rates. So you might see some funny stuff. And we already saw the 10-year yield dip below 150, which is just confounding all the smartest people out there. But I think this. We're going to wake up next spring having spent at least $10 trillion we didn't have. We're going to have a slip back down. Our average GDP, by the way, over the last 40 years is around 2% or even just under. And we're going to have a mountain of taxes thrust upon us. What does the economy look like in that world? So everybody that's getting, is on hopium right now, thinking about what all these great things are going to happen between now and the fall. You have to think about what that world's going to look like come next spring, because I think that's a pretty ugly place, and I think that's what the Fed's thinking too.
How about not next spring? How about a few weeks from now? I mean, if you go, look, just on the small level, you go into a restaurant. I'm seeing people with great restaurants like Michelin star chef Kerry Nahabadian in Chicago she can't get workers in her kitchen. I'm seeing guys. I went to a restaurant on Easter last Sunday, Orthodox Easter, and they're saying, well, it's going to take a while because we had to pay the dishwashers $25 an hour just to get them in.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing was not thought out, and government shutdowns of business. You don't just you don't just flick the switch and then say, okay, we're open now just because Lori Lightfoot holds a news conference and wants people to come to the Chicago Auto Show.
Yeah, but Benny the Bull was there too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, John. I mean, okay, it's like the gym lights on Friday night. When you shut them off, they go off right away. When you come in Saturday morning, it takes a long time for them to warm up and light the gym up again. That's basically the same thing. And you also have to say, not just with the workers, but, here's my argument. I don't think this is inflation. I think this is everybody was closed for a year. They opened up their restaurant for the first time Friday night at 6 o'clock. 150 people sat down and all ordered at the same time. Is that inflationary? I mean, are you going to build a business plan on that for the rest of your life? No, we're just reopening. And to your point about the workers, I also think the supply chains are having those same struggles.
Yes, they are.
None of the ships, none of the trucks, they're not in the right spot. And we're not having customers come through the door in that nice, orderly fashion like we used to have when the economy was moving in a nice, orderly fashion. But everybody on the television, all these guys are calling this massive inflation where I'm like, whoa. No, we just opened up for the first time and we had everybody 150 people order dinner at the same time. And is that inflationary? I say no. So we have to be very careful. And that's the problem. This government did not think about how that was going to happen. And so, I mean, obviously we should have never shut down in the first place.
Exactly.
But even this garbage of we're going to open you up to 60 or 70%. Oh, thanks for letting me go out of business slower. Right? I mean, this is an absolute farce.
But I mean, I know what you're saying is not inflationary, but do you see things like the Fed's funny money as inflationary? I mean, we're seeing this translate into higher raw materials for construction and the like. So there does seem to be some inflationary pressures that are being felt.
I would say there are some, but I still would argue the fact that just because everybody wants to leave the city and move out to the suburbs, can't find a house and wants to build one now, does that mean lumber is inflationary? Mm-hmm. It's just that everybody's doing everything right now at the same time because the supply chains can't handle it. Does that mean it's inflationary? And I guess there's a small amount of inflation in there. Yes, I'll have to.
I mean, you can't print that much money and not have it be inflationary.
No, there's going to be some of that in there. But we didn't invent a new technology.
Right.
Why is the economy suddenly so good? It should have been suddenly so good in December of 2019. What are these people saying? They're trying to tell me that something changed over the pandemic, that this economy is now on steroids. What changed except for the fact, yes, they did give out a lot of money, but a lot of that money's been spent. So I'm still, yes, I'll give you a little bit of inflation. I will. But just because everybody orders at the same time at your restaurant doesn't mean you make a business plan on that happening for the rest of the life of your restaurant.
Well, talking about sort of the near to medium term, I mean, I'm surprised by some of what I'm hearing about not just residential real estate being hot, but commercial real estate being hot too. People selling out of commercial real estate positions for dollars you wouldn't expect. They're not having to take the discount that you thought they'd have to take with, people perhaps not going back to their offices or having scaled down office space and so forth. But at some point, I mean, does the bottom just drop out of this when we realize the implications of all these things that are being done, that were done all at the same time, both in terms of lockdowns and the funny money and now the reopenings? Or do you think if the Fed holds interest rates at effectively zero, you think we sort of just muddle along, we recover to pre-pandemic levels, and we muddle along at 1-2% growth and just have an economy that's not on fire, but it's not in a trough either?
I hate to say it, but I lean towards your first scenario only because we haven't There's nothing new today that we didn't have in 2019 except for the amount of money that the government's thrown at the economy, okay? And the $1,400 checks here and there, and then the business loans. But I would say that those are all temporary. Yes, they can be mildly inflationary. But again, there's something that, I rule my life by common sense, and something doesn't sit well with me, and that's this. We haven't invented a new technology. We haven't substantially changed the way we run our economy. But everybody and their brother on television is saying this is a rocket ship. Well, it better be. We're reopening. But tell me what's different about this reopening in the economy than we didn't have in 2019 except for the government money. And yes, there's some funny money there. But there's still a lot of people that are out of jobs. We still have a 6.1% unemployment rate.
So when the funny money runs out, and then these very short-sighted people who I'm not going to work until I have to, it's an interesting choice in terms of trying to pursue a career. But there's a lot of people that do that. Okay, that's their choice. But when that runs out, and as you say, the exuberance of the reopening expires into next year, for example, you've got big houses, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, projecting 20, some other analysts projecting 40% market correction next year. Maybe not then. Maybe the consequences of all this won't be as bad as we think in terms of a bottom dropping out. We'll just have years and years of very slow growth because of what we've done and what we're poised to do with this administration.
Well, you're exactly right, Dan, and I made this comment on another show earlier this week. It came out that we actually we're below replacement value when it comes to our population here in the U.S.
Right.
And that over the pandemic, we were just joking about how many people would get divorced or stay married, but it never really came up about the birth rate. And as it happens, we're shrinking. And so if that's the case, go look at what happened to Japan. I mean, around 1990, their stock index briefly almost got up to 40,000. And for the next 30 years, as their population began to shrink, their stock market has languished between 10,000 and 25,000. And today it's around 28,000. But it's never been back to its heady highs of 1990. And for 30 years, it's been in a malaise because they've been shrinking. And we're going down that path. They're spending more money. The money that they spend against their economy is much more than ours as far as GDP to expenditures, and they're losing people like we are. And that's obviously why the Republicans and Democrats want to get this immigration thing going, because we need to keep expanding our customer base. But I think that's exactly where we're going, because this is unsustainable. And it's just it's the cup game. You're trying to fool everybody to thinking that we're actually growing when we're not. And we're spending $10 trillion is hard to get your head around if you really think about it. And this guy is proposing things like the capital gains tax to raise $370 billion over 10 years. Really? $37 billion a year, and you just spent $2 trillion last week?
Right.
Nobody looks at the numbers and compares them. So if we're shrinking, and we can't get this started, and once we get these supply chains, and that's a really important thing. And just because you can't get something delivered right now, or you can't get your meal done right now, or you can't get your dish, it's because everybody's doing everything all at once. And that will sort itself out over the next 18 months, but when it does, and we look to the left and we look to the right and go, ooh, we're only going to be growing at 2.5%. We have $10 trillion we spent that we don't have, and look at these taxes. What do you think that world's going to be like?
So
I'm not very bullish.
So let me ask you the question I always ask you: is now the time for me to put all my money in Dogecoin? Is it now?
I'm not touching it. I've got too many licenses to lose with the regulators. I am not going to even talk about it.
Scott, the cow guy, Shalady, Fox Business contributor. Scott, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
All right, see you. Thanks.
See you, Scott.
And join us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Open mic! Open mic Friday! Call it now! Open mic Friday!
Dan and John Cass in for Amy J this morning. And yes, it's Open Mic Friday, taking your calls, comments, criticisms.
Just opened my
concerns,
mic myself.
And general crack pottery, too. 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, 64636DA, turnkey.pro text line. Before we get to some of our calls, earlier in the week, was it just yesterday? I don't know, the days run together.
I'm sitting down.
Sky King, this captain at Southwest Airlines, threw this 3-year-old boy and family off a flight from Denver to Florida to visit his 94-year-old great-grandmother, the kids, for the first time since the pandemic, because his mom disclosed he had sensory issues, and sometimes wearing a mask bothers him. So they threw him off, even though she was assured it wouldn't be a problem when she called the airline to notify them when she talked to the supervisor before she boarded the plane and so forth, she and her family. And so we asked, what would you say to that captain? And maybe what would you say to Southwest stewardesses and pilots the next time you patronize Southwest Airlines? I know what I'm going to say. And now I have another example of this. What would you say in this instance, particularly if you saw this occurring? This is a pregnant woman in a grocery store being accosted by a soy boy over not wearing her mask. And by the way, remember, this is against the backdrop this week of Publix, the big grocery store chain, announcing that in many of the southern and southeastern states in which it operates, they're removing their mask requirement.
Hi, yep, right here, right there, no mask, right there. There we go. Candid camera. There we go. I want you to know that your insensitivity is ridiculous. I no longer have grandparents due to this virus because of people like you who don't want to wear a mask in the store. It's ridiculous, actually. It's insensitive and it's disgusting as a human being for you to show so much privilege to all of these people. There are so many older people in here who have health conditions, other people.
And I'm not going to just...
Great. Oh, whoop-de-doo. Congratulations for your pregnancy. It's ridiculous. And I want you to know that. You're on candid camera, and I want you to know that. 4K. Thanks.
Who is this? Is this a employee?
I think it's a member of Congress. But no, it's just some random dude in the grocery store.
Dude, take a couple steps back because you never know who you're going to be dealing with. It's one thing to go up against a little white chick in Publix, and it's another thing. You pick some other people out, something bad might happen. So
that actually,
chill.
Yeah, that would have been a great time if I was there, somebody was there, some male was there. Apparently there wasn't, or there's maybe male impersonators, but not actual men there, like him. Would have said, did you ever see that Clint Eastwood movie Gran Torino?
Yeah, I love it.
And there's a line.
It's my life, man.
There's a line in there where Clint Eastwood rolls up on some ignoramuses, much like yourself, young man. And he says, do you ever run into somebody you shouldn't have fracked with? Yeah, that's me. And then see what the response is and let it escalate or de-escalate from there. 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro. Answer line, 64636DA, turnkey.pro. Text line, Gary in Joliet. Hey, Gary. Gary.
Hey, Dan. John, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
Hey, I was just curious about this vaccine thing for people that have undergone a splenectomy for that cotiapia problem with the blood clots in their brain. How come the data isn't out there for all the different people that have had problems with these vaccines? Shouldn't the public be notified?
Thanks for the call, Gary. This is the conversation we had at the top of the 6 o'clock hour, and then with Martin Kulldorff from Harvard Medical School at the bottom of the 6 o'clock hour. And Kulldorff said something, too, and I was not aware of this, so it's, value add. That's why you have experts on. But we talked about the VAERS system, which Tucker Carlson talked about the other night, and he was pretty sour on the VAERS system, Professor Kulldorff was. But he mentioned CDC has another system called Vaccine Link, and the FDA has the BEST system. And people should be requesting that they disclose the information they have, because that's called, in terms of adverse outcomes from vaccines, that's called from actual medical reports, as my understanding from what Professor Kulldorff said, versus just the self-reporting that is the mechanism by which VAERS accumulates information and data. So we're going to stay on that and see what information we can get from the CDC's vaccine link, the FDA's system as well, to see if we can help fill in some of that picture just so people can do appropriate risk assessments. And I think that's absolutely a legitimate discussion topic. Frank on Western Avenue. Hey, Frank.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. Yeah, hi. Just wanted to comment on, thanks for taking my call, on the Congresswoman. There's nothing racist about what the doctor, I'm sure she editorialized, but my wife and I had the same problem. And basically, that's kind of like the OB-GYNs. That's their attitude, unfortunately.
Oh, with respect to, so you're talking about Cori Bush, this representative from Missouri, and she was testifying before House Oversight Committee. She's talking about how doctors, OB-GYNs, don't recognize black women's humanity. The one doctor told her to abort this child that was going to be born premature, and ultimately she protested, and she bore a girl who's healthy and 20 years old today, and it's a happy ending. But you're saying that that's sort of their attitude. If there's a problem, just abort it, generally speaking?
Yeah, we had a similar situation. I mean, my son's now in college, but that's you find a new doctor and got the problem solved. But they just kind of go, well, you know, if you have a miscarriage, you can just get pregnant again. That's just kind of their attitude. It has nothing to do with color. They've noticed that that's been along the lines, and you just have to be more fervent about it, because that's kind of like their attitude, unfortunately.
All right, thanks for the call, Frank. Now, of course, John, you mentioned your doctor and you thanked him. So very different experience.
Yeah, Ron Lorenzini, great guy. And, I'm just getting tired of virtue signaling. I'm tired of it.
Yeah?
Okay?
You think it's lost its allure for you?
I see people, in the media virtue signaling, and it's all about my feelings. And you know what? I don't give a rat's about your feelings anymore. Okay? Everyone's got feelings. I'm just tired of it.
Ryan in Downers Grove.
Hey, Dan. Hey, John. Thanks for taking my call. John, real quick, my dad always tells me your column's worth the price of the paper. He's still, paying for the trib. He once cornered you in Union Station and had a conversation with you a few years ago, so he would want me to say that.
Oh, thank you.
Anyways,
thanks to everybody
my
who
comment
reached
is, my comment is on the April jobs numbers. I think this should cause Joe Biden and the team over there at the White House to go back to the drawing board and maybe come up with, I don't know, maybe a $6 or $8 trillion package.
Two's not enough.
Maybe something. Get this, John. Get this, Dan. Maybe $2,800 per person.
Mm-hmm.
That should stop us from complaining for maybe 8-12 months, don't you think?
And working. Yeah, exactly.
Why do you stop there? It's like the minimum wage. Why do they stop at 15? Why don't they go up to $100 an hour?
Why so stingy?
And why not $100,000 for me to sit on my butt and watch Netflix instead of doing something?
Thanks, Ryan.
It's ridiculous.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Rick in Downers Grove.
Hey, good morning. Good hearing you, John, and all.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, I got an idea for your golf outing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of sitting there fishing while everybody's playing golf, a sport, why don't you run around the golf course kicking a soccer ball everywhere, irritating people, because after all, that's what soccer does best, is irritate people.
Hey, Rick, how about if I just wrap you up with a little mask, whatever that tape is, and I'll kick you around the field. It would be, and we could hear your little screams. It would be awesome.
Well,
and I'll supply the vodka. Every 5 kicks, you get another drink.
Rick, thanks for the call, Rick. Rick, I appreciate the gratuitous soccer crack as much as the next guy, but let's encourage Johnny. At least he talked about fishing rather than soccer.
Hey, soccer, you know what? Guess what? Soccer did not kick the All-Star game out of Atlanta, and the Fire are playing Saturday at home, and guess where I'm going to be?
Caracas? Where do they play?
Soldier Field.
kick the All-Star game
I'm joining Tom Owens now to hate you.
Wait.
I'll be hating you. I'll be like tweeting like a little.
Where do they play?
Little B word.
Madrid?
Like,
where are these
they
games
play on Soldier Field, all right? Get to the questions.
Bob at Edison Park.
Hey, guys, going back to your guest right before the break, I'm going to channel Victor Davis Hanson here a little bit, and I think the big problem with our country right now, everything from birth rates to the economy to people not wanting to work, is globalism and basically outsourcing of jobs. I mean, let's face it, there are no more there's less and less high-paying middle-class jobs. The American workers have not had a real pay raise, and I'm not talking about the minimum wage for entry workers. I'm talking about real living working wages for people who have real jobs. It's gone out the window. People are basically being forced economically in cases to go over to the liberal, to the socialist side because they're not given the opportunities. And this goes down to outsourcing and everything else. We sold our kids back 30 years ago, go into engineering, the service sector. This is where the jobs are going to be. They do in those fields. They bring in HB-1B visas from India, Pakistan, everywhere else, who get free insurance. These kids don't stand a chance. And I brought it up a couple times, and I'll get off on this. The last time when the Republicans had a chance, health care is a big driving issue, guys. It's a big driving cost issue for everybody. They should have had a plan in place when they had the opportunity to put that plan in place, and they failed us. But, guys, the outsourcing is killing us. The old saying that we're going to hang the last capitalist with the rope he sells us, I think it should change to the modern day where it says we'll hang the last capitalist with the Chinese rope he buys from Amazon. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Bob. Although, I mean, just to provide a little bit of a counter, 44%, this is NFIB, from NFIB's chief economist, Dunkelberg, National Federation of Independent Businesses, the entrepreneurial class. 44% of all owners reported job openings they could not fill in the current period, up 2 points from March. Unfilled job openings continue to mount as April is the third consecutive month setting a record reading of unfilled job openings. April's reading is 22 points higher than the 48-year historical average. More than double of 22%. 44%, 22%. It's doubled the historical average. So there aren't jobs available? I don't think so. I think you could drop yourself in a town in just about any town in America and get a job in about 10 minutes right now. And by the way, because of the choices we've made collectively as a culture, 50-year low birth rate, below replacement rate, we're going to continue to need immigration to be a growing population. And, oh, by the way, you're not a growing economy if you're not a growing population. So those proposing that we follow the Japanese corporatist model or the leftist zero population growth hysteria are proposing a death spiral for this country. Steve in Orland Park.
Yeah, hi, guys. We always hear breaking news, but never hear the end result of the news. And I have two brief questions. One, what happened to the state's voting on the daylight savings time as far as stopping that? And my second question is, whatever happened to that union crook Tom Cullerton on the north side? I never heard any more about that either. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
I don't think Tommy's with us anymore.
Tom, well, he resigned his seat in the state Senate, but Tom is not scheduled to go to trial for
Tom Cullerton. I'm thinking of the other Tom Cullerton.
What Tom Cullerton?
Yeah, there's been a lot of them.
Well, Tom Cullerton, the state senator, I assume he's talking
yeah.
about, who's under indictment for a ghost job with the Teamsters, right? He's, like Ed Burke. They'll get around to those trials. Let them live their lives for a little while longer. Like Burke, I think Cullerton's not scheduled to go to trial until 2022.
Jason Meisner of the Tribune, and I respect him, and I think you all should read him if you want to know about what's going on down there. Has written stories about 1 million documents dumped in Discovery. 1 million from the feds to Madigan and those people.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Mike in Franklin, Tennessee.
Hey, first I want to give my Greek hello. Yasu Yanni.
Yasu Michali.
You know what? You can't get away from this Biden text. He's going to double capital gains, and sometimes you look at letters to the editor. On August 18th last year, letter to the editor in the Wall Street Journal mulling Joe Biden's capital gains tax hike. And gentlemen, I hope everybody hears this. This one guy writes in, I'm reminded of Mr. Biden's boasts from June 23rd, 2014. I don't own a single stock or bond. I have no pension. I have no savings account, but I got a great pension and I've got a good salary. That says it all. The guy, he doesn't care about anybody. He's been on the dole for 50 years, and now he's going to double your capital gains.
Yeah, and he's asking everybody else join him on the dole. Thanks
but listen,
for the call, Mike.
Don't be worried because Hunter Biden will do okay.
Dawn
got some investments going on in China.
Dawn in Plainfield.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I would remind that pilot that if a child has sensory issues, most likely they have a disability, and that child is protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. If I was that parent, I would file a ADA complaint on that pilot. A shame. But I want to say Happy Mother's Day to all the moms. And, John, I want to know what you're cooking for your wife for Mother's Day.
I ordered. I'm not cooking because I'm picking. We're going to see my mom. So I got these great baskets from Carrie Nahabadian at Brundeel, and they're kind of fancy, but I think my mom will like them, and I'll take the champagne out of hers. She's 90. And, Betty said, don't get me one. And I'm like, you know what? Betty put up. It's hard to have two women in the house. I'm sorry, I don't want to sound like a sexist, but a mother-in-law and a wife together in the house helping to raise the kids. But
got to hit the champagne a little bit harder.
Dawn, I'm telling you.
Thanks, Dawn.
It's the best thing that we ever did.
And, yeah, that's great for your mom. It's 90. That's great. Yeah. But no bubbly for mom?
I'm going to take her to Mykonos, and she could have a ouzo on the rocks.
There you go.
Small one, though.
All right. Chuck and Delavan to close it out.
Holy smokes, John, thanks for mentioning my high school garage band, Two Women in a House. Hey, I got to tell you something. You had that Scott guy on earlier. Yeah, it was Kentucky Headhunters cover band.
Nice.
Anyway, that guy was over there, keeps talking. I'm telling you, the reason why the price of lumber is sky high is because of Black Lives Matter. They made us board up all of America. I'm not, it's $8 for a 2x4. I was talking to, it isn't because everybody's moving to the suburbs. But anyway, have a nice weekend. And to John, Opa, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for the call, Chuck. See you on the dance floor.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.